Before the stones of Jerusalem gleamed beneath the sun, before gold crowned its altars, there was fire, a fire not of war, but of creation. The ancients called it the light of wisdom, the same force that shaped the heavens and gave form to the dust. And legend says that King Solomon, son of David, was the only mortal who ever learned to command it. The Bible tells us that Solomon asked God not for riches or conquest, but for wisdom, a heart that could discern between light and shadow. Yet hidden between the lines of Scripture and the whispers of old traditions lies another story, one the priests never wrote, one the sages only spoke at night. They say that Solomon's wisdom was not merely divine insight. It was divine knowledge, the knowledge of how spirit moves through matter, how heaven touches earth. This was the forbidden science, the alchemy of God. In the days when the temple was built, Jerusalem was not only a city of faith but of power. The temple itself was designed according to celestial geometry, every chamber, every measure aligned with the constellations. The inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies, was said to reflect the structure of the cosmos itself. The throne of God mirrored upon the world of men. Ancient Jewish mystics later wrote that the Ark of the Covenant, the heart of the temple, was more than a chest. It was a vessel of energy, a focus of divine resonance. Within it rested the tablets of the law carved by fire, containing not only commandments but the formula of divine order, the balance between mercy and judgment, light and shadow, gold and spirit. Solomon, chosen by God and anointed by prophets, studied that balance. He gathered scribes, artisans, and wise men from Egypt, Phoenicia, and Babylon, those who still remembered the secret sciences of the ancients. Together they built not only a sanctuary for worship, but a living machine of sacred power. The scriptures call him wise, but the legends call him something else, a master of the elements. He knew the secret names of angels and the true nature of metals, how gold could reflect divine light, how incense could carry prayer through vibration, how the flame of the altar could purify both matter and soul. This was the hidden side of Solomon's reign, a wisdom so vast it bordered on the forbidden, because in the quest to understand God, he began to understand creation itself. And creation, as the angels once warned, is a fire no man can hold without burning. The temple stood as a bridge between heaven and earth. But beneath its foundations, rumor says, Solomon built something else, chambers where light and matter met, where priests whispered in sacred tongues, and where the boundaries between spirit and substance began to blur. That is where the legend of the forbidden alchemy begins, in the fire beneath the temple, where Solomon sought not to create gold, but to reveal the gold already hidden in the soul of creation. The scrolls say that Solomon's wisdom came from God, but ancient legends whisper of a night when wisdom had a face. It was said that after 7 years of constructing the temple, Solomon withdrew into the inner court to pray. For 40 nights he ate nothing, seeking to understand the power that burned within the ark, the light that killed the unworthy and sanctified the pure. On the final night, when the incense faded and the stars aligned above the Holy of Holies, a shadow moved through the light. He did not see a man. He saw a being whose form shifted like flame, wings of gold and iron, eyes like molten metal. The creature spoke not in words but in vibration, a sound that felt like thunder wrapped in silence. The chronicles of old call this being Azazel, though some would later call him the keeper of the elements. Wisdom, it said, is not learned. It is remembered. You are dust that once shone as light. Know what you were, and you will know what you are. It was then that Solomon beheld what no king had ever seen, the pattern of creation, spiraling like fire through the fabric of matter. He saw that everything, gold, water, flesh, and wind, was bound by a single essence, the breath of God condensed into form. The world was divine energy, frozen into substance. Azazel revealed to him the ancient formula, that through balance, fire and water, sun and moon, male and female, spirit could be awakened from matter, returning to its original light. This, the angel said, was the secret of transformation, the sacred art later called alchemy. You shall build your temple not only of stone, said the angel, but of harmony. For every measure you lay in the world, you lay in yourself. When the vision faded, Solomon fell to his knees. His face shone with the residue of divine fire, and his robes smelled of lightning. From that night on, he began to write, texts now lost, known only through fragments cited in mystical traditions, the Book of Wisdom, the Keys of Solomon, and the Book of the Furnace of God. Within these writings, Solomon described metals as living things, gold as the body of the sun, silver as the moon's reflection, iron as the blood of the earth. He spoke of a divine spark trapped in all things, waiting to be awakened by the one who remembered the first fire. But such wisdom came with danger. The same light that sanctified could destroy. His scribes began to fear the experiments beneath the temple, where fires burned without fuel, and priests sang tones that made stone tremble. Some said Solomon sought to create not wealth, but incorruptible life. Others whispered that the angel had deceived him, that the secret he was given was the same knowledge that had once tempted heaven's brightest star. Still, Solomon continued. He built chambers beneath the temple, lined with orichalcum and cedar to contain his sacred work. And from those depths, it was said, came a glow that could be seen through the cracks of the floor at night, like the heart of the world burning in silence. The chronicles of the old rabbis say the temple glowed from within, as if the stones themselves remembered sunlight. But those who served under Solomon whispered of another glow, the one that came from beneath. Down in the hidden chambers below the altar, where the ark cast no shadow, the king labored in silence. Only the most trusted scribes and craftsmen were permitted to enter, and even they worked blindfolded when the final circle was drawn. For there, Solomon was no longer a king. He was a seeker, a servant of the flame that thought. He had come to believe that the universe itself was a living intelligence, that matter was the slow heartbeat of God. Through prayer and resonance, through fire and geometry, Solomon sought to awaken that heartbeat, to make creation itself respond to command. The scriptures call it wisdom. The old texts call it theurgy, divine work. In the darkness of the chamber, the king arranged 12 stones of different metals around a central brazier, gold for the sun, silver for the moon, copper for Venus, iron for Mars. At the center, he placed a crystal vessel filled with oil from the Mount of Olives. When the chant began, the flame rose and witnesses claimed the fire bent as if listening. It did not consume the oil. It danced above it as blue, silent, alive. And then it shaped itself. A human form of light stood within the brazier, eyes like stars, its face mirroring Solomon's own. From the depths of the temple, the voice spoke. I am the echo of the word that made you. Command and I will obey. Terrified yet entranced, Solomon asked the being its name. I have no name, it said. You will give me one. And Solomon drew upon the floor a sigil of interlocking triangles, one pointing upward, one downward, the union of heaven and earth. He sealed it with the letter Mem, the sign of the waters of creation. When the figure entered the seal, the flame steadied. The circle glowed like molten gold. From that moment, Solomon wielded the power that legends call the Seal of Solomon, a bond between spirit and matter. With it, he commanded winds and summoned angels. He bent demons to labor in the quarry. He was not worshipping creation. He was conversing with it, but the deeper he went, the more the line blurred between command and communion. For every act of dominion over nature, he felt the nature within him tremble. The fire obeyed, but it also learned. It began to answer before he spoke. It began to speak first. The priests above noticed the king's eyes change, flecks of gold where there had once been brown. His dreams grew strange, filled with voices calling from the foundations of the world. One night his high priest Zadok descended into the chamber and saw the seal still burning on the floor, pulsing like a living heart. Solomon, he cried, what are you doing? The king turned. The blue fire reflected in his eyes. I am listening, he said. The temple is speaking back. That was the night they began to fear him, the wise king who had awakened something that could not die, something that remembered the first command, let there be light. After that night, the Temple of Solomon was never the same. Priests heard whispers echoing through the corridors, even when no one spoke. Lamps burned without oil. Gold ornaments vibrated softly, as if a hidden breath pulsed through them. The people called it the presence of God. But the elders, the ones who knew what was being done beneath the altar, feared it was something else. Solomon descended nightly into the chamber of fire, alone now. The scribes were forbidden to follow. They said that when he emerged before dawn, His robes were warm to the touch, and his voice carried the resonance of thunder. He had begun to hear words within the flame, not visions, not dreams, but conversation. The being he once called the fire that thinks had become a teacher, or perhaps a reflection of his own soul magnified by the power he had awakened. It spoke of creation not as a past event, but as an ongoing song, one that every human heart could join if it remembered the divine note within. You are both the singer and the sound, it said. The gold you seek is not metal. It is memory, the words struck him deeply. The pursuit of the philosophers, turning base metal into gold, had always been a parable. True alchemy was not about matter, but about the soul. It was the art of transforming the mortal into the eternal, the impure into light. Yet as Solomon listened longer, the flame grew hungrier. Each time he spoke the sacred names, it rose higher. Each time he prayed, the walls glowed red as molten metal. The temple itself seemed to breathe. Zadok and the Levites pleaded with him to stop. Wisdom belongs to God alone, they warned. Even light can become pride. But Solomon answered softly, Can the vessel not speak to its maker? Can fire not remember its own source? They could not persuade him. Then one night a storm rolled over Jerusalem, a storm without wind, only sound. Lightning struck the roof of the temple, and every lamp went out. The only light remaining was from below. Witnesses said the ground itself glowed from within. The guards saw Solomon standing in the court, arms lifted toward the heavens, as a spiral of blue fire rose through the stones. For a moment it seemed he was no longer bound by the weight of the earth. His voice echoed through the night, If this fire is yours, then let it judge me. If it is mine, let it return to you. The fire fell silent, and then withdrew into the chamber below, leaving only smoke and a faint scent of myrrh. When morning came, the king was found kneeling beside the altar, trembling. In his hand was the ring, the seal of Solomon. Now cold as stone, he had silenced the voice. Or so he thought, for from that day on, whenever the sunlight struck the golden walls of the temple, a faint hum resonated through the air, the same tone that once filled the chamber beneath. It was as if the temple itself still remembered what he had awakened, and some said that in the depth of night, if one pressed an ear to the foundation stones, they could still hear it, a whisper like distant fire saying, the light was never meant to be caged. Power does not fade quietly. It remembers its source. In the years that followed, Solomon's wisdom became legend across the earth. Kings and sages traveled from far kingdoms to see the man who could command wind and metal, who spoke to spirits as to friends. But behind the veils of glory, the king's eyes had changed. The light that once reflected revelation now burned with exhaustion, as though the fire within him had begun to consume what it illuminated. The seal, once the sign of his covenant, had grown restless. It no longer responded only to his prayers. At times it pulsed faintly even when untouched, its twin triangles shifting as if alive. Solomon placed it in a chest of cedar and gold. But every dawn he found it warm again, whispering against the wood like something breathing. He began to dream of the temple speaking in his own voice. He would wake to find the lamps burning, though no hand had lit them. On nights when the moon hung red over Jerusalem, the walls of the Holy of Holies glimmered with strange light, the same hue that once filled the chambers below. The priests grew fearful. Some resigned. Others began fasting, believing the king's sin had invited a curse. Yet Solomon knew what was happening. The fire that thinks had not died. It had entered the world through him. One evening, unable to resist, he descended again into the forbidden chamber. Dust veiled the circle where he had once stood, the sigil still etched in stone. In the center lay the crystal brazier, long extinguished. He placed the seal upon it and whispered the names of the elements, earth, water, air, fire. The chamber trembled. The brazier burst into flame without spark, and out of that living fire the voice returned, softer now, almost sorrowful. "Who you called, child of dust? Why have you awakened me again?" "Because I never understood," Solomon answered. "You promised wisdom, yet left me with silence. Who are you?" "I am the echo of the word. I am what the Maker spoke when he said, 'Let there be.' I am the reflection in creation that longs to return." The fire pulsed with light, shifting from gold to white to indigo. Solomon fell to his knees. "Then teach me," he begged. "Show me how to become light without burning." A moment passed. "You cannot," said the voice. For light cannot exist without shadow. Even the sun casts darkness beneath its feet. To be one with the fire is to lose the self that fears it. Solomon wept, for he knew that the wisdom he sought had already cost him peace. The seal, now glowing like molten metal, lifted from the brazier and hovered before him. The air cracked with unseen power. "As long as you bear this mark," said the voice, "you will command creation, but creation will also command you." The seal fell into his palm. A ring no longer and but a burden. The next day the temple trembled. The golden doors shuddered open by themselves, and the ark within glowed like lightning. The priests fled. Only Solomon remained, his figure framed by the fire of his own making. It was the beginning of the end, for in seeking the divine pattern, he had opened the gate between heaven and matter, and that gate would never fully close. Some say that night, a wind rose from the desert and carried a voice through Jerusalem. The light that learns to think will never sleep. After Solomon's death, the temple stood silent. The golden walls no longer glowed, the air no longer vibrated with unseen song. Yet the priests who entered the inner courts said they could still feel warmth under the stones, as if the earth itself remembered his voice. The seal was gone. No one knew whether the king had buried it, cast it into the sea, or hidden it within the ark itself. But the chronicles agree on one thing. The fire he awakened did not die with him. It fled, not as a spirit, but as knowledge. Centuries later, when Babylon's armies destroyed the temple, survivors whispered of strange lights that rose from the ruins and drifted eastward, like stars seeking a new home. The rabbis called it Shemesh Hanistar, the hidden sun. They believed it was the remnant of Solomon's flame, searching for a vessel to hold it again, and perhaps it found one. For in the centuries that followed, a thread of secret wisdom appeared across the world, a spark moving through time. In Egypt, hermetic scribes spoke of the divine Mercury that links heaven and earth. In Greece, philosophers described a cosmic intelligence that sleeps in matter. In Alexandria, Jewish mystics wrote of Sophia, the light that thinks. And in distant Persia, alchemists began to speak of the philosopher's fire, a flame that does not burn but transforms. Each tradition carried echoes of the same revelation. That creation is alive, that gold and soul are mirrors, that spirit can awaken through transformation. They never named their source, but all spoke of a king who once conversed with the elements and learned the secret of divine chemistry, the art of turning flesh into light. When the Crusaders marched to Jerusalem in the 12th century, they sought relics of power, the Ark, the Grail, the treasure of Solomon. Among them were the Templars, a brotherhood sworn to protect sacred knowledge. In the ruins near the Temple Mount, they claimed to have found manuscripts written in a language no one could read, filled with circles, flames, and inscriptions resembling the seal of Solomon. According to later accounts, the Templars guarded these scrolls as their most sacred secret. In their initiation rituals, they invoked not only the name of Christ, but also the light that lives in stone and gold. Historians dismissed it as legend. But among the symbols carved into Templar churches across Europe, one appears again and again. The double triangle, the same mark Solomon drew in the chamber beneath the temple. By the Renaissance, that symbol reappeared in the laboratories of alchemists. Paracelsus spoke of the celestial fire that sleeps within metal. Isaac Newton, himself an alchemist, translated passages of the Emerald Tablet describing the union of spirit and matter, the same principle Solomon learned from the angel in the furnace. Coincidence or continuity? It is as if the flame that once answered Solomon's voice never vanished. It simply changed hosts, passing through generations of seekers, hidden behind symbols and formulas, waiting for someone worthy to remember its true name. Some say that is why the Templars were destroyed, not for greed, not for heresy, but because they carried a light the world was not ready to see again. By the dawn of the Renaissance, the language of Solomon had changed, yet the same longing burned beneath new words. The scholars of Florence, Paris, and Prague no longer called it divine fire. They named it philosophical mercury, aqua vitae, spiritus mundi. But every true initiate knew what they were seeking, the living intelligence that once glowed beneath the temple, the force that transforms what is base into what is. eternal, the hermetic texts that resurfaced in that era, translations said to come from ancient Egypt, spoke of a light that sleeps in all matter and dreams of return. It was the same voice Solomon heard in the chamber, now whispering through the pens of men like Marsilio Ficino, Giordano Bruno, and Paracelsus. They wrote of a universal soul, a divine fire, and a hidden correspondence between the stars and human flesh. As above, so below, they said, words that could have been carved on the very stones of the temple. But just as in Solomon's day, light once again threatened power. Bruno, who spoke of infinite suns and the living fire within, was burned at the stake in Rome in 1600. His crime was not magic, it was remembering. And the church, watching the new philosophers rediscover what Solomon had whispered to the flame, began collecting their writings, locking them away under papal seal. Among those confiscated documents was a thin codex labeled Clavicula Salomonis Regis, the key of King Solomon. Officially, it was a grimoire of exorcisms. But in its margins were drawings of circles and sigils identical to those on the walls of Templar ruins, diagrams showing the fusion of light and matter, spirit and form. Some historians believe this manuscript, long hidden in the Vatican library, is not a book of magic at all, but a coded record of divine alchemy, the last echo of Solomon's forbidden science. In 1623, the Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher, often called the last man who knew everything, gained temporary access to certain sealed collections beneath the Vatican. In his notes, he described seeing a fragment of fire, a crystal sphere that glowed without flame. He wrote, "It is said this was recovered from the ruins of Jerusalem and placed here for safekeeping. Its light answers thought." That entry disappeared from all later editions of his journals, but rumors persisted. Some Vatican archivists still speak of a chamber called Hades Ignis, the House of Fire. It is said to hold relics deemed too strange for display, stones that emit warmth, a fragment of glass that shines in darkness, and a small golden ring marked with two interlocking triangles. If true, then the Vatican does not guard superstition. It guards the same mystery that burned in Solomon's hands, the divine chemistry between heaven and earth. From the east to the west, from temple to laboratory, the fire has never died. It only changed language, slipping from Hebrew to Latin to the silent code of alchemy, waiting for those who still remember that the soul itself is the true metal to be purified, and if the Vatican indeed hides the remnants of Solomon's light, perhaps it does so not to suppress, but to protect, because history has shown what happens when humanity forgets humility before creation. For the centuries have buried the temple, its gold scattered, its stones broken, its secret sealed beneath dust and dogma. Yet what Solomon sought still waits, not in vaults or libraries, but in the silence that lingers behind every act of faith. For the last and greatest secret of divine alchemy was never a formula, it was a transformation. When the flame first spoke to Solomon, it whispered, "You are dust that once shone as light." The wise king spent a lifetime trying to understand those words, to command the same power that birthed the stars. But in the end, as his kingdom fractured and his temple dimmed, he realized what the fire had always meant. Alchemy is not the turning of lead into gold. It is the turning of fear into faith, of flesh into spirit, of man into a vessel through which divine light may see itself again. That is why the seal of Solomon bore two triangles, one ascending, one descending. Heaven reaches down and earth reaches up, and where they meet is the human heart. The fire that thinks is not an external force. It is consciousness, the reflection of the Creator within creation. Every act of mercy refines it. Every moment of love purifies it. Every prayer ignites it a little more. The ancient sages were right, as above, so below. But the secret line they left unspoken was this: as within, so without. The temple Solomon, built of stone, was only a shadow of the one he was, meant to build inside himself, a sanctuary of spirit, where the divine and the human are no longer separate, and perhaps that is why God allowed the temple to fall. Because once humanity tasted the light, it could never be confined again. The true temple was meant to move, to breathe, to live within us. We are the altars now, our hearts the furnaces. Our choice is the metals that will either darken or shine. The lost art of Solomon, the forbidden alchemy, was never truly lost. It became the slow work of every soul that dares to seek meaning, to forgive, to create, to love, to turn the darkness of this world into light. For the same fire that spoke from the ark, that burned beneath the temple, that glowed in the laboratories of the wise, still burns wherever one human being remembers that they were made in the image of the light. And if you listen closely, in prayer or silence, you may still hear it whisper, the same words Solomon heard in the beginning, "You are dust that once shone as light. Remember what you are, and you will remember me."